fear knotted inside Clara Belle Nash as the stagecoach jolted to a stop at Silver Creek, a lonely outpost in the Arizona Territory of 1876. Before we kick off this adventure, don't forget to hit like on the video and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. The sun sagged low, painting long shadows across the desert dust. Tonight was meant to be her wedding night, a thought that turned her stomach sour. She had never even laid eyes on the man she was to marry. All she knew was the name Marshal Hodge, a wealthy mine owner who had secured her through a mail-order arrangement her desperate father struck before he died. End of the line Miss called Amos Burke, the driver, breaking her thoughts. Silver Creek. Clara gathered her few possessions, just a worn carpet bag that held the remnants of her Boston life. At 22, she had surrendered to this grim bargain. Her father's gambling debts had left her no choice. Now she was little more than property passed from one man to another. As she stepped down, the desert dust clung to her skirts like a curse. Silver Creek was scarcely more than a crooked row of wooden buildings, a general store, a saloon, a modest hotel. No familiar face waited. "Did Mr. Hodge send someone for you?" Amos asked, lowering her bag. "He was supposed to," Clara answered, scanning the empty street. The sun dropped fast, and a chill ran over her shoulders that had nothing to do with the evening air. "Well, I can't linger. Got a schedule to keep." Amos tipped his hat. "Good luck, miss." Before she could protest, the stage rattled off, leaving her alone in the dying light. She stood uncertain when the saloon doors banged open and 3 men stumbled out. Their laughter cut short as they spotted her. "Well now," drawled the tallest wade cutter, nudging his companions. "Fresh off the coach." Clara clutched her bag, backing up. The men closed in, grins sharp with whiskey. "You lost, darlin'?" slurred Jeb Hanlon, his breath sour. "I'm waiting for Mr. Hodge," she said, forcing her voice steady. The men traded looks. Cutter chuckled low. "Hodge, Marshal Hodge. Oh, we know him." He leaned closer. "Dead 3 weeks now. Mine cave-in." The blood drained from her face. That can't be true." "True as the dust you're standing in," Wade sneered, reaching for her arm. "But don't fret, sweetheart. We'll take care of you." Her back struck the wall of the general store. Panic clawed her chest as the men boxed her in. "This isn't happening. Not like this," she whispered. "I reckon the lady's not interested." A deep voice cut clean through the tension. The drunks spun around. Clara glimpsed a tall figure framed in the sunset square jaw, weathered skin eyes burning with steady fire. He wore a long trail coat, a beaten Stetson, and a Colt heavy on his hip. "This ain't your concern, Cole," Wade spat. "I'll make it my concern," replied Ryder. Cole calm but firm. His hand rested loose near his revolver, but nothing about him was casual. For a breath, Clara thought bullets would fly. Then Wade cursed, spat into the dirt, and waved his men off. "Come on, boys. Ain't worth the fight." They staggered away, and Clara exhaled shakily. Ryder stepped closer, careful not to startle her. "You all right, ma'am?" His voice softened. "Yes. Thank you," Clara stammered. "What they said, it's true." Ryder admitted a shadow in his gaze. Marshal Hodge died in that mine cave-in. The blow landed hard. Her one desperate plan had vanished. "No money, no kin, and night closing in. I'm Ryder Cole," he added. "Town marshal here." "Clara Belle Nash," she replied without thinking. I came here to marry Hodge." Ryder finished gently. "You're not the first mail-order bride to find him gone. I'm sorry you came all this way for nothing." Tears threatened, but she held them back. She would not break before a stranger, Marshal or not. "Is there a hotel in town?" she asked. "Silver Creek Inn's down the street," he nodded, then paused. "But do you have the coin?" The sting of the question bit deep. She had barely enough for a night. "I have some," she murmured. Reading the truth in her eyes, Ryder said, "Come with me. Hattie Jo Burns runs a boarding house. She's good folk. Might give you a room till you figure things out." With no other choice, Clara followed him down the dusty road. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his stride purposeful, hair a bit too long, curling at the nape beneath his hat. She guessed him early 30s, with lines carved by both laughter and grief. "How long you been Marshal?" she asked, needing distraction. 5 years now," he answered. "Back then this town was just a saloon and a store. Grew up quick once the silver strike hit. You mean Hodge's mine?" Ryder nodded, eyes dark. "That's the one. That mine was the heartbeat of this town," Ryder Cole said quietly. "Hodge's operation kept half the folks here fed. For now, his foreman's keeping it running, but with no kin to claim it, lawyers are riding up from Tucson next month to decide what's what." He cut Clara Belle Nash a look. "Did you ever trade letters with him?" "Hardly any," Clara admitted. "The whole arrangement came through an agency in Boston. My father—" Her voice faltered shame, pressing her down. She didn't want to say more. They soon reached a tidy 2-story house set back from the main street, a sign swinging gently in the evening breeze, "Burns Boarding House." Ryder rapped on the door, and moments later it swung open to reveal Hattie Jo Burns, a round-faced woman with warm eyes. "Evenin', Marshal," she greeted before spotting Clara. "And who might this be?" "This is Miss Clara Belle Nash," Ryder explained. "She came on today's stage expecting to wed Marshal Hodge." The kindness on Hattie Jo's face turned to sorrow. "Oh, honey, bless your heart. Come in, come in." Inside, while Hattie Jo poured tea, Ryder told her the tale. The home smelled of fresh bread and was humble, but welcoming neat furnishings touched by a woman's hand. "Of course she can stay," Hattie Jo declared. "The back room's empty. That is if you don't mind pitching in with chores. My arthritis won't let me keep up like I used to." Clara's chest loosened with relief. "I'd be glad to help in any way I can." "That's settled then," Ryder said, rising. "Miss Nash, I'll check in on you tomorrow. We'll figure a way forward." She reached out, catching his arm. "Thank you, Marshal Cole. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't come along." Something flickered in his eyes. Concern maybe something deeper. "Just doing my job, ma'am. Rest easy now. Tomorrow might look brighter." After he left, Hattie Jo showed Clara to a modest little room. Narrow bed, a washstand, a window overlooking a tiny garden. Alone. At last, Clara let the tears fall. She had crossed the country to marry a stranger, only to find herself abandoned, nearly broke in a town where no one knew her name. What should have been her wedding night had nearly ended in ruin. She thought of Ryder Cole, his calm command, the steadiness in his eyes. At least there was one decent man in Silver Creek, but she knew she couldn't depend on him forever. She'd have to carve her own way in this unforgiving land. Come morning, sunlight spilled across the quilt and roused her. Disoriented at first, then the weight of yesterday rushed back. She pulled on her simple blue cotton dress and went downstairs. In the kitchen, Hattie Jo was already kneading dough. "Morning, dear. Sleep all right?" "Yes, thank you," Clara lied. Truth was, she had tossed all-night worry gnawing at her. "There's coffee on the stove and porridge still warm," Hattie Jo said. As Clara ate, she asked quietly, "Is there any kind of work for a woman like me in this town?" The older woman's hands stilled in the dough. "Well, there's always the saloon, but that ain't fit for a lady. What skills do you have? I can read and write." Taught at a small school back in Boston. No school here yet, though folks talk of startin' one. We got a dozen young'uns or so. Maybe the general store could use help. Or Dr. Elias Ward, he's always swamped with his books and accounts. A knock at the door cut her off. Hattie Jo wiped her hands and answered. Moments later she returned with Ryder Cole at her side, hat in hand. "Mornin', Miss Nash," he said. "As well as I can be Marshal. Thank you." Hattie Jo excused herself, leaving them at the table. Ryder sat opposite her. "I've been thinking on your troubles. Sent a telegraph to the county seat last night. Blackwell's estate might bring up legal questions." Clara frowned. "But we weren't married." "No, but there was a contract, wasn't there?" "You came all this way on that promise." She blinked, realizing she hadn't considered it like that. "Yes. I have papers. They're in my bag. Best to let a lawyer look at them. If Hodge covered your passage or set terms, it might matter. My father handled it all. The agency took its fee from him before." She cut herself off, unwilling to bear her family shame. Ryder studied her quietly. "Forgive me for asking, Miss Nash. But if Hodge were alive, if the wedding had gone through, what would you have done?" Clara drew a sharp breath, caught off guard. "I'd have been his wife. I'd have done my duty. Many marriages start that way, Marshal Cole. Love's a luxury not all of us can afford." A shadow passed over Ryder Cole's face. "Maybe so," he said, "but it still don't sit right with me." "What doesn't sit right?" "Clara Belle." Nash answered, her voice sharper than she intended, is being stranded in a strange town with no prospects. To her surprise, Ryder smiled. "You've got grit, Miss Nash. That'll carry you far out here." He stood, setting his hat back on. "I've got to make my rounds, but I'll ask around about work for you. In the meantime, I'll have my deputy bring over your trunk from the stage office." "My trunk, it came yesterday," Clara asked quickly. "Amos mentioned it this morning." Ryder confirmed. Relief washed through her. Inside that trunk were nearly all her clothes and the last keepsakes of her old life. "Thank you, Marshal," she said. "Ryder, please. No need for formality." He tipped his hat and stepped out. After he left, Clara busied herself helping Hattie Jo Burns with chores, glad for the distraction. The boarding house had 3 boarders already: Otis Lane, an elderly shopkeeper, Noah Briggs, a young bank clerk, and a widow named Lillian "Lily" Crane, who gave piano lessons. None pried into Clara's troubles, and she was thankful. By midday, lanky young Finn Harper Ryder's deputy showed up with her trunk. "Marshal Cole says to tell you he's talkin' with Dr. Elias Ward about some bookkeeping work," he told her. Clara thanked him, then spent the afternoon unpacking and helping Hattie Jo prepare supper. As they worked, Hattie Jo shared the town's stories. Silver Creek's been swelling ever since the mine opened. Some good folks, some bad. Marshal Cole keeps the worst of it in line. "He seems capable," Clara observed softly. Hattie Jo gave her a sly look. "Ryder's a fine man. Lost his wife near 7 years back. Never took another, though plenty have tried to catch his eye." Clara felt a spark of interest at that, but quickly tamped it down. She was in no position to entertain such notions. That evening, while Clara sat on the porch enjoying the cooling breeze, she saw Ryder striding toward her. Without his long duster, she could better see his broad shoulders and lean frame. His shirt sleeves were rolled back, revealing strong forearms darkened by the sun. "Evenin', Miss Nash," he greeted, sweeping off his hat. "Good evening, Marshal," she replied, forgetting his earlier request to use his first name. "Mind if I sit?" he asked, nodding toward the empty chair. "Of course." He sank into it with a tired sigh. "Been a long day. Your deputy mentioned you'd spoken with Dr. Ward Jader." Nodded. "He could use someone to sort his papers and keep the accounts. Not much pay, but honest work. He'll see you tomorrow morning." Gratitude welled up inside her. "Thank you for the trouble." "No trouble. Small towns like this, we look out for each other. For a moment, they sat in quiet, watching the mountains painted gold by the setting sun. It's beautiful here, Clara admitted. So different from Boston. I reckon so, Ryder said. What was life like back there? She hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. I lived with my father. After Mother passed when I was 16, I kept house and taught at a girls' school. She lowered her eyes. But my father wasn't wise with money. When he died 6 months ago, I discovered he'd gambled everything away, even our home. There were debts. She swallowed. The marriage arrangement with Marshal Hodge was meant to settle it, to give me a chance at a new life. Ryder was quiet, a long moment. I'm sorry. That couldn't have been easy. Life rarely is, she answered with a strained smile. But I'm here now, and I'll make the best of it. Dr. Ward's a fair man, Ryder said. If you prove yourself, the job could become steady. I'm grateful for the chance. As darkness deepened, Ryder rose. Best I get back on patrol. Silver Creek may be small, but there's always ruckus at the saloon after dark. Thank you again, Clara said, rising with him. In the lantern glow, his eyes met hers. Miss Nash, he said, voice steady. Whatever happens, you're not alone here. I won't let harm touch you. The force in his tone stirred something inside her she dared not examine. That's very kind of you, Marshal. Ryder, he corrected gently. Ryder? She echoed the name, tasting strangely intimate. He smiled, and for a heartbeat she glimpsed the man beneath the badge, the one grief had scarred, but not broken. Good night, Clara. He replaced his hat and walked into the night, his silhouette fading into the dark. For the first time since stepping into Silver Creek, Clara felt a fragile ember of hope. Maybe, just maybe, there was a place for her here. The next morning she dressed carefully in her best navy dress with its lace collar and made her way to Dr. Ward's office, a modest building near the town's center. The doctor, a balding man in his 50s with kind eyes behind spectacles, greeted her warmly, putting her at ease at once. Marshal Cole speaks mighty well of you, Miss Nash, Der Elias Ward, said kindly once introductions were made. Told me you're educated and looking for respectable work. That's right, Dr. Clara Belle answered. I can read and write, and I've some practice keeping accounts from helping my father with business matters. It wasn't the whole truth. Her father had rarely let her near his papers, but she had taught bookkeeping to young ladies back east and understood the basics well enough. Dr. Ward motioned her to a small desk tucked in the corner, stacked high with loose papers. As you can see, I'm better at setting bones than sorting numbers. I need someone to wrangle all this make-up patient bills and keep supplies straight. I can handle that, Clara said with quiet confidence. The pay's modest $5 a week to start. Hours are 9 to 5, 6 days. Won't make you rich, but it'll cover room and board at Hattie Joe Burns' place. Respectable work, steady pay. It was more than she dared hope for. When would you like me to begin? No time like now, he replied with a smile. Think you can make sense of this mess? Clara surveyed the chaos and managed a small grin. I'll do my best, doctor. By midday, she had sorted everything into tidy stacks, patient records, invoices, letters, and accounts. Dr. Ward was called away to tend a miner's crushed hand, leaving her to keep at it alone. She was so absorbed she didn't notice the door creak open until a shadow fell across the desk. Looking up, she found Ryder Cole watching with an amused expression. Already got this place whipped into shape, he said, nodding at the piles. There's plenty yet to do, she replied, laying down her pen. But I've made a start. Dr. Ward was near singing your praises when I passed him in the street. Called you a godsend. Heat rose to Clara's cheeks. That's very kind of him. I just wanted to see how you were settling in, Ryder added. And invite you to supper tonight. Nothing fancy, the hotel's got a decent dining room. Beats eating alone. The invitation caught her off guard. Oh, just a meal between friends, he cut in quickly. Thought you might welcome a chance to step out. A mix of relief and something she didn't want to name stirred in her chest. That would be lovely. Thank you. I'll call at 7. Ryder tipped his hat and left. Clara stood staring after him, confused by her own reaction. Of course it was kindness, nothing more. Still, she couldn't deny the flutter in her stomach at the thought of sharing a table with him. The afternoon passed swiftly as she worked. By the time Dr. Ward returned, she had built a new filing system and begun copying patient notes into a proper ledger. "This is remarkable," the doctor exclaimed, surveying her progress. "Didn't know it could ever be so orderly." "I'm glad you're pleased," Clara said softly. "Tomorrow I'll prepare proper invoices for your patients." "Splendid. You've done enough for today. Get some rest." Back at the boarding house, Clara had just enough time to ready herself. She slipped into her one good dress, a forest green silk she'd saved for special occasions. It felt too fine for a small-town meal, but it was all she had left that wasn't worn through. Hattie Jo Burns helped pin up her hair eyes, twinkling with mischief. "The Marshal's a fine man," Hattie Jo remarked, fastening the last pin. "Handsome, too." "It's just supper," Clara protested, though her racing pulse betrayed her. "Of course," dear Hattie Jo replied, not sounding convinced. Right on the stroke of 7, a knock sounded. Ryder stood there freshly shaved, dressed in a clean white shirt and dark waistcoat boots, polished hair neatly combed. He looked less like the dust-worn lawman and more like a gentleman caller. "Miss Nash." He greeted his gaze catching as he took in her appearance. "You look beautiful." "Thank you," she said suddenly, shy. "And please call me Clara." The Silver Creek Hotel's dining room was modest but refined white cloths on the table's polished silverware. As they walked in, curious eyes followed them. Clara knew tongues would wag about her arriving with the Marshal, but she found she didn't mind as much as she thought she would. They chose from the simple fare steak or chicken. Once settled, Ryder leaned back, studying her. "So, how do you find Silver Creek so far?" "It's different," Clara said carefully. "Smaller than I'm used to, but folks seem kind." She paused. "Most of them, anyway." Ryder's jaw tightened. "Those men who bothered you when you arrived, they won't trouble you again. You spoke with them." "I did more than speak," he admitted. "They know now you're under my protection." The possessive weight in his voice sent an unexpected shiver through her. "I appreciate that. But I hope to stand on my own here in time." "Of course," Ryder said quickly. "And the job with Dr. Ward is a good start. The town's growing. More chances will come." Their meals arrived, and talk turned lighter. Ryder shared how he'd come to Silver Creek 5 years back, when it was little more than a stage stop. The silver strike had changed everything, drawing miners, merchants, and families. "It's becoming a real town now," he said with pride. "We've got a bank, a telegraph line, and there's talk of a schoolhouse soon." "A school would be wonderful," Clara said, remembering her teaching days in Boston. "Children ought to be taught even out here on the frontier," Ryder Cole said thoughtfully. Clara Belle Nash nodded. "For 3 years I taught girls back east reading, writing, arithmetic, and a touch of history. Ages 8 to 12. Would you take it up again if this town ever raised the money for a schoolhouse?" The question caught her off guard. I hadn't let myself think that far ahead. But yes, I believe I would. Ryder's smile deepened. "I'll mention it to Mayor Collins. He's been trying to convince the council we need a real school, not just lessons crammed into Lily Crane's parlor." As their talk stretched on, Clara found herself drawn to him in ways she hadn't expected. It wasn't just his rugged looks. There was a steadiness, a quiet compassion, and a fierce loyalty that shone through whenever he spoke about Silver Creek's future. "You really care for this town," she said softly. "I do," he admitted. "When I came here, I was lost." Silver Creek gave me purpose again. Clara sensed the wound behind his words, surely tied to the wife he had once loved and lost. But she didn't pry. Instead, she asked gently, "What sent you west in the first place?" A shadow crossed his features. "After the war, there wasn't much left for me back east. I fought for the Union 4 years that felt like 40. When it ended, I couldn't fit myself back into ordinary life. So I drifted cowhand surveyor, even rode shotgun for Wells Fargo a spell until I landed here. And became Marshal," Clara finished. He gave a wry half-smile. "The last Marshal got himself shot in a poker game. Mayor asked me to wear the badge till they found someone else. 5 years later, I'm still wearing it." "It suits you," Clara said honestly. Their eyes held across the table. For a moment, the saloon noise and the clatter of dishes faded, leaving only the pull of that silent connection. Ryder's hand twitched toward hers, then hesitated, drawing back. "It's getting late," he said roughly. "I'd best see you back to Hattie Joe Burns." The night air had turned sharp, and without a word, Ryder shrugged off his coat, draping it over her shoulders. The wool was warm, carrying his scent of leather soap and dust. "Thank you for supper," she said as they reached the gate. "I truly enjoyed our talk." "As did I," Ryder replied. They stopped beneath the porch light, silver moonlight catching between them. "Clara." His words were cut short by a chorus of shouts from the saloon, followed by the crack of a gunshot, Ryder's stiffened hand snapping to the Colt on his hip. "I've got to go. Get inside quick." Before she could answer, he was already running into the dark, swallowed up by the night. Clara stood frozen, his coat still wrapped around her, worry twisting her stomach. Remembering his command, she hurried inside. Hattie Joe sat in the parlor, knitting needles clicking nervously. "Was that gunfire?" she asked as Clara entered. "Yes, from the saloon. Marshal Cole went to see to it." "That man earns every penny?" Hattie Joe sighed. "Rarely a week passes without ruckus at that saloon." She noticed the coat around Clara's shoulders. The Marshal's coat, Clara flushed. "He lent it to me, said it was cold." A knowing smile tugged at Hattie Joe's mouth. "He's taken a shine to you. Haven't seen him look at a woman that way since he first came to town." "You're mistaken," Clara protested weakly. "He's only being kind to a newcomer." "If you say so, dear." Hattie Joe went back to her knitting. "Though men don't usually dress up in their Sunday best for newcomers, nor look at them like they hung the moon." Face burning, Clara fled to her room. Alone, she slipped off Ryder's coat and hung it carefully over a chair. She told herself not to read too much into his attentions. He was respected, established, could have his pick of women in Silver Creek. Why would he look twice at a penniless mail-order bride? Yet as she undressed for bed, she couldn't banish the memory of the way he'd looked at her across the table, or the warmth in his voice when he spoke her name. For the first time since arriving in this dusty town, Clara drifted to sleep with a smile. The next morning, voices downstairs woke her. She pulled on her dressing gown and crept to the top of the stairs. "She's still resting," I imagine Hattie Joe was saying. "Poor thing was worn out after all she's been through. I just wanted to make sure she got home safe," came Ryder's voice, tired but relieved. "Things got lively last night." Clara descended, unwilling to eavesdrop further. "Good morning," she said, drawing both their eyes. Ryder looked up, hat in hand, stubble shadowing his jaw, weariness plain on his face. "Miss Nash." "Clara, I'm sorry to disturb you so early." "Not at all," she replied gently. "I worried after hearing the shot." "Is everyone all right? No grave injuries?" he said, a shadow crossing his features. "Just a card game turned ugly." "The fools are cooling their heels in my cells. I'm glad you're unharmed," Clara whispered. Their eyes locked, that same unspoken thread pulling tight between them. Hattie Joe cleared her throat and rose briskly. "I'll see about breakfast," she announced, disappearing into the kitchen with a knowing smile. When they were alone, Ryder Cole stepped a little closer. I wanted to apologize for rushing off last night. There's no need, Clara Belle Nash answered softly. It's your duty. Still, that's not how I meant for our evening to end. He hesitated, then admitted, I enjoyed your company more than I expected. Her heart quickened. As did I, she murmured. Ryder looked as if he might say more, but his eyes flicked toward the kitchen door and he held back. I should let you get ready. Dr. Elias Ward will be expecting you. Oh, Clara blinked suddenly, remembering her new position. Yes, of course. I'll call on you again soon, Ryder promised, settling his hat on his head. Maybe Sunday after church we could take a ride. I'd like to show you more of the country. I'd like that very much, she said, her voice betraying the thrill she felt. When he left, Clara hurried upstairs to dress, her mind spinning. His words felt more like the beginnings of a courtship than simple kindness, a possibility she had never imagined in Silver Creek. The next days fell into a rhythm. Morning and afternoon hours were spent at Dr. Ward's office sorting his records and learning the ailments of Silver Creek's people. Evenings she passed at Hattie Joe Burns' boarding house, helping prepare supper and sharing talk with the other lodgers. Ryder stopped by nearly every day, sometimes only tipping his hat on his rounds, sometimes pausing for coffee and a quiet talk on the porch. Each visit deepened her curiosity about the man beneath the badge. He was gentle in ways that surprised her, thoughtful, in a way most men of the frontier were not. Though she tried to guard her heart, she found herself waiting for the sound of his boots on the steps. By Sunday, Clara dressed with unusual care for church in the small, white, clapboard building at the edge of town. The congregation was modest but warm, and by the end of the service she felt she had been introduced to half the town. Ryder sat beside her shoulders, brushing in the crowded pew. Afterward, 2 horses stood ready. Clara was grateful she had brought her riding habit, a sturdy dark blue wool that allowed her to ride astride. I thought we'd ride out to Marshal Hodges' claim, Ryder said as they set off. It's about an hour. The land's beautiful, and it might help you find some closure, seeing what would have been your home. The thoughtfulness of the gesture touched her. I'd like that. They rode at a measured pace through desert that was more alive than Clara had first imagined. Spring had painted the plains with yellow wildflowers, and the far mountains wore a purple haze. Ryder pointed out landmarks weaving in stories of Apache history and the battles once fought here. Do they still come through these parts? Clara asked nervously. On occasion. But it's been peaceful for years. Their reservation lies north. Trouble these days comes from our own kind, claim jumpers, bandits, or men with too much whiskey in 'em. The ride loosened Clara's tongue. She spoke of Boston, her mother's death, her father's descent into cards and drink, her struggle to keep respectability as debts mounted. It felt freeing to speak the truth aloud. Ryder listened quietly, his questions proving he cared. In turn, he offered pieces of his story, his boyhood in Pennsylvania, the war that dragged on for 4 long years. Union Army, he said quietly. Felt more like 40 years than 4. His eyes drifted, haunted. When it ended, I couldn't fit back into the old life. So I drifted west cowhand surveyor, rode shotgun for Wells Fargo, until I came here. And took up the badge, Clara said gently. He gave a rueful smile. The marshal before me got shot over a hand of cards. Mayor asked me to fill in. 5 years later, I'm still wearing it. It suits you, she told him with conviction. Their eyes met across the space between saddles. For a moment, it was as if the desert itself fell silent. Then Ryder's voice grew low. Lillian, my wife died of typhoid 7 years ago. We'd been married only 3 years. After she was gone, I couldn't stand our hometown. Every street, every house reminded me of her. So I came west thinking I could outrun the grief. And did you? Clara asked gently. He shook his head. You don't outrun grief. But out here I learned to live with it, to build something new. The rawness of his honesty struck deep. I'm so sorry for your loss, Clara whispered. He gave a small, grateful smile. It was long ago. But thank you. I haven't spoken of her to anyone in years. They crested a ridge. Below lay a quiet valley, a stout log cabin by a stream, corrals and sheds scattered nearby, and the yawning mouth of a mine with rusted ore carts about. That's Marshal Hodge's place, Ryder said. One of the better spreads around. Built it all in just 2 years after striking silver. Clara studied what might have been her home. The cabin looked solid and welcoming, yet the isolation pressed on her chest miles of wilderness on every side. What was he like? She asked, softly, realizing she knew almost nothing of the man she'd nearly wed. Driven Ryder answered after a pause. Not unfriendly, but never much for company. Worked alongside his men before the mine started to pay. Rarely saw him in town. Can't say for sure why he sent for a wife, but a man gets lonely out here, and he was building something likely wanted an heir. They dismounted and walked the grounds. The cabin was locked, but through the window she glimpsed sturdy furnishings, a table and chairs, a stone hearth shelves of books and crockery. What'll happen to it all? She asked. Lawyers will be here next month. From what I hear, he had no kin. The mine'll likely be sold to Eastern investors. Ryder hesitated. There may be something in his will concerning you given the arrangement. Clara shook her head. I doubt it. The papers were with the agency, not directly with me. We never met. They mounted again, turning their horses toward town, the wind tugging at Clara's veil of hair as she cast one last look back at the lonely homestead that almost but never truly belonged to her. The sun now burned high overhead. As they rode back toward town, Clara Belle Nash found herself strangely grateful that fate had carried her to Silver Creek too late to marry Marshal Hodge. The thought of a life spent in that lonely cabin with a stranger so cold and distant seemed a bleak future compared to the possibilities that now lay ahead. Much of that had to do with the man at her side. In only a few days, Ryder Cole had shown her more kindness and regard than she'd known in years. Something was taking root between them, something that unsettled and thrilled her all at once. Near the edge of the valley, Ryder suggested they pause at a stream. They dismounted, and he spread his coat on the grass. From his saddlebag, he pulled out bread, cheese, and dried fruit. A humble meal, yet welcome after the long ride. I've been thinking, Ryder said as they ate, about you teaching again. Mayor Collins wants a proper school for the young ones. It wouldn't pay much at first. Are you offering me a post? Clara asked, surprised. Not officially, that's for the council to decide. But I've spoken with a few members, and they'd like to meet you. Hope rose in her chest. To teach again, to have real purpose, it was more than she'd dared dream. I would very much like to meet them, she said, her voice alight. Ryder's smile told her he was pleased. They finished their meal quietly, watching sunlight dance across the water. When it was time to leave, he helped her up, his hands steady on her waist, lingering longer than necessary. The warmth of his touch set her pulse racing. She found herself caught in his gaze, and for a heartbeat she thought he might kiss her. His eyes dropped to her lips, and he leaned the slightest bit closer, then, with visible restraint, stepped back and cleared his throat. We'd best be heading. It'll be dark before long, he said, voice rough. The ride back was quieter, charged with unspoken tension. When they reached Hattie Joe Burns' boarding house, Ryder lifted Clara from her horse, his grip firm and sure. Thank you for today, she said, reluctant to let the moment end. My pleasure, he replied, his eyes warm in the fading light. Clara. Whatever he meant to say was cut short by Hattie Joe calling from the porch. There you are. I was startin' to fret. Supper's nearly on the table and you've got a visitor waitin' in the parlor. A visitor? Clara asked, startled. She knew almost no one in town. Says he's a lawyer out of Tucson, Hattie Jo explained. Something about Mr. Hodges' estate. Clara and Ryder exchanged a look of surprise. I'll come with you, Ryder said firmly, tying off both horses. Inside, a thin, nervous man with spectacles and a leather case rose to greet them. Mr. Jenkins, he introduced himself. I represent the firm handling Marshal Hodges' estate. Miss Nash? He continued, I understand you were contracted to marry the late Mr. Hodge. That's correct, Clara said, feeling steadied by Ryder's presence beside her. You have the documentation. Clara retrieved the contract from her trunk. The formal agreement detailing her father's debt, the agency's payment, and the marriage arrangement. Mr. Jenkins studied it, then nodded. This appears in order. Miss Nash. I am here to inform you that Mr. Hodge left provisions for his future bride in his will. Clara stared in disbelief. But we never met. He didn't even know my name. Nevertheless, his will specifies that should he die before his bride arrived, she would inherit his cabin and the surrounding 50 acres. The mine itself and its workings are left to his business partners. Clara gaped, stunned. I don't understand. Why would he do such a thing? I cannot speak to Mr. Hodges' intentions, the lawyer said evenly. I merely carry out his wishes. The property is yours should you accept it. And if I refuse, Clara asked, finding her voice, then it will be sold and the proceeds folded into the estate. Ryder spoke up at last. Miss Nash will need time to think this through. Of course, Mr. Jenkins agreed. I'll be in town 3 days while I settle other matters. You may give me your answer then. He handed her a sealed envelope. The deed. If you choose to claim it, you'll need to sign the proper papers. After he departed, Clara sank into a chair, clutching the envelope in trembling hands. I own land, she whispered the words, strange on her tongue. Ryder knelt beside her. Seems you do. If you want it. I don't know what to think, she admitted. It feels wrong taking such a gift from a man I never even met. He made that choice, Ryder reminded her gently. He meant it for his bride. Which you would have been. Clara looked down at the envelope. The cabin is fine, but it's so far from everything. What would I do out there alone? Ryder covered her hand with his. You don't have to decide tonight. Give yourself time. Later that evening, after a hushed supper with the other boarders, Clara sat on the porch alone, turning the envelope again and again in her hands. The deed represented something she hadn't known since her father's death security. With property of her own, she wouldn't be dependent on kindness or charity. And yet, the thought of living alone in that remote cabin chilled her more than the desert night. Another thought weighed heavy on Clara Belle Nash. Now her growing feelings for Ryder Cole and the notion of a future in Silver Creek that had nothing to do with Marshal Hodge or the legacy he'd left behind. The creak of the porch step announced Ryder's return. He'd gone to meet with Mr. Jenkins at the hotel, but had promised he'd come back. Still wrestling with the decision, he asked, taking the seat beside her. It isn't simple, Clara admitted. Few important choices ever are, he agreed. He was quiet for a beat, then took off his hat, running a hand through his hair. There's something I need to tell you. About Hodge. The tone of his voice made her tense. What is it? The mine collapse that killed him. It wasn't truly an accident. Her breath caught. What do you mean Hodge had enemies? He worked his men hard, paid them little, and tempers ran hot. After his death, a few miners who'd quarreled with him vanished. I believe that cave-in was no accident. You mean he was murdered? Clara whispered. That's my belief, Ryder said grimly. If you take that property, you may be stepping into danger. Whoever wanted him gone might not take kindly to his would-be bride claiming his land. A chill ran through her. You think someone might try to harm me, I can't rule it out. Especially if you were living out there alone. But the mine goes to his partners, not me, Clara protested, trying to steady her thoughts. The cabin sits on 50 acres. There's been talk Hodge planned to expand those acres, may hide another vein of silver. If that's true, the land could be worth a fortune. The idea that danger might follow her choice shook her deeply. She had come west searching for safety, not to step into the shadow of murder. What should I do? She asked, hating how vulnerable she sounded. Ryder's hand closed warmly over hers. I can't make the call for you, Clara. But whatever you choose, I'll stand by you. The conviction in his tone steadied her. Thank you, Ryder. For a time they sat in silence, his hand still holding hers. Then Ryder's voice dropped more hesitant than she'd ever heard it. There's another path you could take. What's that? He turned to her eyes intense in the lantern light. Marry me. The words struck her like a hammer blow. Of all the things she had braced herself to hear, this was not among them. Ryder, hear me out, he said quickly. I know it's sudden. We've known each other less than a week, but there's something between us. I know you feel it too. Clara couldn't deny it. From the very first moment he'd faced down Wade Cutter in the street, she had felt a connection that ran deeper than gratitude. As my wife Ryder went on, you'd be safe. We could claim the land together, sell it, keep it whatever you wanted. You could still teach, still keep your independence. But you wouldn't have to face it all alone. Her voice trembled. Is safety the only reason you're asking? His expression softened. No, Clara. Not the only reason. He lifted his hand, brushing her cheek gently. I've been alone a long time. I never thought I'd feel this way again after Lillian died. But the day I saw you standing in the dust, scared yet defiant, something changed. His honesty stole her breath. This is happening so fast, she whispered. I know. I'm not asking for an answer tonight. Think on it same as you're weighing Hodge's property. But know this, my offer comes from the heart, not just duty. Clara nodded, overwhelmed. I'll think about it. That's all I ask. Ryder lifted her hand and pressed a kiss to her knuckles. Then he left her on the porch, her mind and heart in turmoil. In less than a week, her life had been turned upside down. She had arrived expecting to wed a stranger, only to find herself holding the deed to land the chance to teach again, and now a proposal from a man who stirred feelings she had never known. That night, sleep would not come. By morning, she had made her choice. After breakfast, she borrowed paper and ink from Hattie Joe Burns and wrote a letter. When it was sealed, she walked to the Marshal's office. Ryder was at his desk studying wanted posters when she stepped inside. Surprise and pleasure lit his features. Clara, I didn't expect you so soon. I've made my decision, she said firmly, about the property and about your proposal. Ryder set the papers aside and rose slowly, his expression guarded. Clara drew a steadying breath. I'll accept the property, but not to live there alone. And her heart pounded as she forced the words out. I will marry you, Ryder, if you still want me. The caution on his face broke into a smile that transformed him. In 2 strides, he was before her hands, framing her face. Are you certain? He asked, his voice husky with emotion. I don't want you to feel pushed. I'm certain, Clara replied, strength in her tone. It may be sudden, but out here life doesn't always follow Boston's rules. I trust you, Ryder. I trust what I feel when I'm with you. With a low groan, Ryder Cole pulled Clara Belle Nash into his arms, his lips finding hers in a kiss that began tender, but quickly deepened, full of hunger neither of them had expected. Clara melted against him, her arms twining around his neck, as she kissed him back with equal fervor. When at last they parted, breathless, Ryder pressed his forehead to hers. "I never thought I'd feel this again," he murmured. "Never thought I'd even want to." Clara understood. This wasn't convenience nor duty. It was the start of something rare and precious. When she asked softly, "As soon as you're ready," he replied. "Tomorrow, next week, next month, your choice, Clara. From here on, it's all your choice." That word struck her like a bell choice. Something she had been denied her whole life, first by her father's debts, then by being sent across the country to wed a stranger. Now, at last, her life was hers to shape. Next Sunday, she decided, after church. A simple ceremony with the town, as witness. "Next Sunday it is Ryder," said his smile widening. He kissed her again, gentler this time. Then he reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a small box. "It was my mother's," he said, opening it to reveal a plain gold band set with a pearl. "It isn't much, but it's perfect." "It's beautiful," Clara assured him, offering her hand. The ring slid onto her finger, as if it had been waiting for her all along. News of their engagement spread through Silver Creek like wildfire. Hattie Jo Burns was overjoyed, claiming she had seen it coming all along. Dr. Elias Ward congratulated Clara warmly and insisted she could continue her work at his office after the marriage. The town council, led by Mayor Collins, formally offered her the post of school teacher once the schoolhouse was finished in the fall. When Mr. Jenkins, still in town, processed the papers for Clara to claim Marshal Hodges' property without issue. When she told him she and Ryder would wed within the week, the lawyer nodded approvingly. "Wise decision," he remarked. "The land will be safer with a marshal's name on it." But before leaving, he added, "Miss Nash, I ought to tell you there have been inquiries about the Hodge property from mining men in San Francisco. They suspect more silver lies under that land." Ryder exchanged a sharp glance with Clara. "What kind of inquiries offers to purchase?" Jenkins explained. "And quite generous ones. It confirmed Ryder's suspicions the land was worth far more than anyone admitted." "Thank you," he said tightly. "We'll consider it." Later, as they walked back to the boarding house, Clara asked quietly, "Should we sell? If men from San Francisco are interested." Ryder considered. "It's your property, Clara." "Ours," she corrected softly. "Once we're married, it'll be ours. And I want your counsel." He smiled at her correction. "My counsel is to wait. Silver in the ground won't vanish, and one day we may want that cabin ourselves. For now, we'll see what comes." The thought of a future together, children laughing in that sturdy cabin, a life built beside a man she trusted, warmed Clara through. "Then we'll wait." The days before the wedding passed in a blur of preparations. Silver Creek embraced the occasion with excitement. It had been years since the town celebrated a marriage. The women, led by Hattie Jo, arranged a small reception while the men decorated the church with wildflowers gathered from the hills. On Sunday morning, Clara awoke with a peace that surprised her. No doubts, no fear, only certainty. She dressed in her best gown, carefully altered with lace from the general store to serve as a wedding dress. Hattie Jo pinned her hair in soft curls, weaving in sprigs of wildflowers. "You look beautiful, dear," Hattie Jo said, tears in her eyes. "That Marshal won't know what hit him." "Thank you," Clara whispered, squeezing her hand. "For everything, for taking me in when I had nowhere else." "Nonsense," Hattie Jo replied briskly, though her eyes stayed damp. "It's been a joy having you here, but I'll miss you sorely." The church was full when Clara arrived. Ryder stood at the altar, nervous but handsome, in a new suit, his face lighting up the moment his eyes found hers. He didn't look away as she walked down the aisle alone. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. When the preacher declared them man and wife, Ryder cupped her face and kissed her so tenderly that more than one woman dabbed at her eyes. The celebration that followed was joyous. Silver Creek welcomed its new schoolteacher and Marshal's bride with open arms. There was music, dancing, and food enough for all. Through it all, Ryder kept close to Clara, his hand often finding hers, his gaze always seeking her across the crowd. As the sun sank low, they slipped away to Ryder's home at the edge of town, the house that would now be theirs. It was modest, but welcoming, a parlor, kitchen, 2 bedrooms, and a study. Ryder had spent the week readying it. New curtains, fresh paint, flowers on the table. "Welcome home, Mrs. Cole," he said, sweeping her into his arms to carry her across the threshold. Clara laughed, clinging to him. "It's perfect, Ryder." He set her down gently, his expression turning solemn. "Clara, there's something I need to tell you before tonight." A flutter of nerves tightened in Clara Belle Nash's chest. "What is it?" she asked, as Ryder Cole took her hands in his. "I know why you came to Silver Creek," he said, his gaze steady. "To wed a man you'd never met, bound to a contract. Your first night as a wife would have been born out of duty, not choice." Clara swallowed hard, the memory of that stagecoach ride, and her dread of what awaited her rising fresh again. "I want you to know," Ryder went on gently, "that tonight, and every night after, is yours to choose. I'll never take what isn't freely given." Tears welled in her eyes. "Ryder, I love you. I love you too, Clara," he said simply. "Truth is, I think I started falling the moment I saw you stand your ground against Wade Cutter and his boys." He cupped her face in his hands. "I want our marriage to be built on that love, not on obligation." Clara touched his cheek, her heart so full it ached. "Then I choose you, Ryder Cole, tonight and all the nights to come." He kissed her, passion and tenderness woven together, leaving them both breathless. Then Clara, her choice clear in her shining eyes, took his hand and led him toward their bedroom. Their bedroom. Later, wrapped in each other's arms, as silver moonlight spilled across the floorboards, Clara marveled at the path that had brought her here. She had come west expecting her first night as a wife to be marked by fear and surrender. Instead, she had found a man who returned that night to her as a gift, one of love freely given and joyfully received. "What's on your mind?" Ryder murmured, tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. Clara smiled, pressing closer. "I'm thinking about choices. About how sometimes the roads we don't choose are the ones that bring us exactly where we belong." Ryder kissed her forehead softly. "I'm grateful for whatever road led you to me." "And I to you," Clara whispered, sure at last of where her future lay. Silver Creek had given her more than refuge. It had given her a home, a calling, and a love she'd never dared hope for. In the weeks and months that followed, life settled into a rhythm rich with blessings. The schoolhouse was finished quicker than expected, and by late summer, Clara was teaching a dozen eager children, sons and daughters of miners, merchants, and ranchers. She and Ryder often visited the Hodge property, picnicking by the stream, talking of what might one day be. When winter came, they celebrated their first Christmas in their cozy home, surrounded by friends who felt like kin. And when spring returned, with wild flowers and soft desert winds, Clara shared the news that their family would soon grow. A child would arrive before year's end. Ryder's joy knew no bounds. He built a cradle with his own hands, and each evening read aloud to Clara's swelling belly, his deep voice soothing mother and unborn child alike. The town celebrated with them. Hattie Jo was already gathering women for a quilting circle to stitch baby blankets. On a crisp autumn morning, with golden leaves drifting on the breeze, Clara gave birth to their daughter, Lillian Rose Cole, named for the wife Ryder had lost, and for the new life they now shared. As they held the tiny girl between them, Ryder brushed a finger down her cheek, whispering, "She's beautiful, like her mother. She has your eyes." Clara smiled, weary but radiant. "And your strength," Ryder added. "She'll need it growing up out here. She'll have everything she needs," Clara promised, including the freedom to choose her own path. Ryder nodded, understanding. That gift mattered most to them both. Years passed. Silver Creek flourished, new businesses opened, more families arrived. Ryder continued, as Marshal respected and admired, while Clara's school grew until another teacher was hired to help. They never sold the Hodge land. Instead, they built a small summer cabin there, a place of peace where they spent school holidays. The land did hold silver, though not in the amounts San Francisco speculators had hoped. It was enough to secure a future for their children, first Lillian, then their son Thomas Cole, and later another daughter, Faith, the boldest of the three. Through joys and trials, their love endured the bedrock of all they built. And on quiet nights when the children were asleep, and they sat side by side on the porch beneath the endless desert stars, Clara sometimes thought back to that frightened young woman who had stepped off a stagecoach into an uncertain future. "What are you smiling at, Ryder?" would ask, slipping his hand into hers. "Just counting my blessings," Clara would answer, squeezing his fingers, "and finding more than I can number." If this story has touched your heart, I invite you to stay with us to discover more true tales of the Wild West. Stories that honor resilience, tenderness, and the spirit that God placed in those who blazed the trail. Subscribe, share, leave your thoughts in the comments, and join us once again to journey across this untamed land. Thank you.